Have you ever loved someone so deeply for so long, only for them to disappear without a word? 7 years. That's how long we were together. We built a life, shared dreams, met each other's families, talked about kids, and argued over curtain colors like any long-term couple. He held my hand through panic attacks, and I held his secrets like glass, fragile but precious. And then one morning, he vanished. No goodbye, no breakup, just silence. His phone disconnected, his apartment emptied. His friends didn't know. His mother, who used to call me every Sunday, went dark too. Callen Thorne ghosted me. After 7 years, he disappeared like we never happened. I spent months questioning everything. Was it something I said? Something I did? Was he dead? Was I nothing? But here's where it gets twisted. A year later, I received an accidental email. It was a digital invitation to an engagement party. Callen Thorne, Isolde Varen. Hosted by Verena Thorne. Yes, his mother. The same woman who once said I was like a daughter. The RSVP link mocked me, but it didn't sting as much as the note attached to the invitation. We're thrilled to welcome Isolde into the Thorne family, Callen's true soulmate. Their love story is proof that real connections always find their way. I wasn't just forgotten, I was rewritten. So what would you do if the man who ghosted you was about to marry someone else, and his own mother helped him erase you? I'll tell you what I did. I put on my best dress. I walked into their golden, glittering, too-perfect party, and I brought someone with me, his mother. Not Verena Thorne, the smiling socialite handing out champagne, but the real Verena, the one who called me in tears 2 weeks before, the one who learned the truth about her son, the one who helped me plan everything. You think you know how this story ends? You don't. Because the night of that party, someone cried, someone screamed, someone collapsed, and it wasn't me. Stay with me, because I'm going to tell you exactly how I crashed his engagement party with the one person he never saw coming. They say when someone leaves you without closure, the silence becomes its own kind of prison. That was true for me. For months, I lived inside that silence, trapped in the echo of every moment Callen and I had ever shared. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe there had been an accident. Maybe he'd had a breakdown. Maybe his fear of commitment finally swallowed him whole and he didn't know how to say goodbye. But every theory only made me feel smaller, like I wasn't worth the truth. In the beginning, I still clung to hope. I checked my phone obsessively, rereading our last texts as if they held a secret code. Dinner tonight? Thinking Thai. That was the last message I ever got from him. I responded with, "Sure, usual place?" He never showed. I waited in that restaurant for 2 hours. After 3 days of silence, I went to his apartment. The door was ajar. The place was gutted. No furniture. No photos. Not even the damn coffee mug I'd bought him with the stupid "Trust me, I'm an architect" slogan. Gone. His neighbors hadn't seen anything. The landlord said the lease was terminated early and that a moving company came at dawn. No forwarding address. At some point, people stopped asking if I'd heard from him. They didn't know what to say anymore. I didn't blame them. There's only so much sympathy people can give before your heartbreak becomes a burden. I stopped talking about him. I stopped saying his name. But the truth is, I never stopped wondering. It took almost a year to piece myself back together. I focused on work. I buried myself in editing deadlines and manuscript slush piles. I started journaling again, scribbling down thoughts I never dared speak aloud. I told myself I was healing. I even went on a few dates. Awkward, mostly, but I was trying, until the email came. It hit my inbox on a Wednesday morning at 9:12 a.m., a time so ordinary it's etched in my brain like a scar. The subject line was, "You're invited." It looked like spam. I almost deleted it. But then I saw the names, Callen Thorne and Isolde Varen. The email was glossy and curated, with champagne graphics and looping cursive fonts. A video montage played, Callen and Isolde on a beach, in front of a fireplace, dancing under fairy lights. A voiceover from Callen talked about finding the one I was always meant to be with. The bile rose in my throat. I don't remember standing up, but suddenly I was pacing the room, my heart thudding like I'd run a marathon. I clicked replay. Again and again. There was a photo of him proposing in Santorini, down on one knee, her hands clasped over her mouth in shock. She was wearing the same dress I once tried on during a random shopping trip with him. He'd said it wasn't really my style. I should have deleted the video. I should have blocked the sender and gone back to pretending he never existed. But then I scrolled to the bottom of the invite. There it was, hosted by Callen Thorne, the same woman who used to call me sweetheart, who once cried in my arms when her dog died, who sent me a Christmas card even when Callen forgot, who swore she'd be heartbroken if I ever left her son. She didn't just know about the engagement, she was celebrating it. I should have felt rage or betrayal. But what I felt most of all was humiliation. I had been written out of his life like a bad draft, no closure, no explanation, just deleted. And now they were parading this fairy tale as if I never existed. 7 years meant nothing to him, to them. That night, I opened a bottle of wine and sat on my kitchen floor, the kind of night where every memory knocks the wind out of you. I remembered how Callen used to trace his fingers down my spine when he thought I was asleep, the way he made French toast with too much cinnamon, how he once made me a playlist called Songs for When the World Sucks. I smashed the wine glass against the sink. It didn't help. The next few days passed in a haze. I avoided social media, but the algorithm had its own cruelty. My feed was flooded with wedding content, suggested vendors, romantic playlists, honeymoon destinations, as if the universe had decided to mock me with tulle and lace. But the numbness didn't last forever, because something inside me shifted. This wasn't about wanting him back. It wasn't even about revenge, not the messy, dramatic kind. It was about reclaiming the narrative. I had been erased, and I wasn't going to let that be the end of my story. That's when I remembered Verena. She'd loved me once. Or at least, she'd loved the idea of me. The thoughtful, attentive girl who always brought flowers when invited over. The woman who stayed up talking with her when Callen got too caught up in his own world. And if she'd loved me once, she could love me again. So I booked a hair appointment, got a fresh cut, changed my wardrobe, not to impress them, but to feel like someone who didn't just survive a heartbreak, someone who transcended it. Then I made a reservation at the same cafe Verena used to frequent. I sat at the window, ordered her favorite rose tea, and waited. It didn't take long. She walked in exactly at 3:15, as she always did on Thursdays. When she saw me, her expression faltered. Surprise, then confusion, then something softer. "You look well," she said cautiously. "Thanks. You do too," I replied, standing. We didn't hug, but we didn't have to. There was a tension, but also a pull. She sat down. We ordered. And then, in between sips and guarded conversation, I dropped it. "So, you're throwing a wedding." Her eyes flickered. "You heard." "It was in my inbox," I said, and smiled. "Beautiful invite." She looked away, ashamed. "I didn't know you two ended on bad terms," she finally said. "Callen never told me anything. He just said you drifted." I let out a breath. "He ghosted me, Verena. Packed up and left without a word." Her mouth opened slightly. I had no idea. For a moment, she looked genuinely shaken, and that's when I knew. I still had a place in her heart, a place I could use, so I played it carefully. I didn't cry. I didn't beg for sympathy. I just told her my truth, quietly and clearly. The love, the years, the disappearance, and how I found out about the wedding. By the time we parted ways, Verena had touched my hand twice and told me she wished things had gone differently. I gave her a soft smile and said, "Some stories deserve a better ending." What I didn't say was, mine was just beginning. I didn't expect Verena to call, but 3 days later, she did. There was hesitation in her voice, a careful calculation beneath the warmth. "I've been thinking about what you told me," she said. "And If you're open to it, I'd like you to come to the engagement party. As a friend, a familiar face. I froze. My heart thudded loud in my ears. Why? She paused. Because I believe you deserve to be seen. It could have been a trap, or worse, pity. But I knew Verena. She wasn't cruel. She was proud, meticulous. Her decision to include me wasn't random. It was deliberate, and it was perfect. I said yes. The next 2 weeks were a blur of quiet planning. Not the vengeful, dramatic kind. No slashing dresses or stealing cakes, just calm precision. Truth was my weapon. Timing was my strategy. I rehearsed my lines in the mirror. I researched the guest list. I learned that Isolde Varon, Callen's fiancée, was the daughter of a shipping magnate and a woman who once hosted a reality show on interior design. Glossy, poised, exactly the kind of person who would post videos of their proposal to 1.2 million followers. Their engagement video was easy to find, a sunset proposal in Bali. Callen kneeling with a ring, her mascara miraculously untouched. The comments were full of strangers crying and reposting the reel with captions like goals and manifesting this energy. I watched it with stillness. My Callen had become her Callen. No, not mine, never really mine. Because a man who vanishes without goodbye was never yours to begin with. The party was held at the Thorne family estate, a sprawling mansion built like it wanted to be remembered. French windows, marble floors, a chandelier the size of a car. The kind of place where betrayal could hide behind curated smiles and champagne flutes. I wore a navy silk dress with a low back and a higher purpose. Nothing too flashy, just enough to remind Callen what confidence looked like when it wasn't begging for attention. When I stepped out of the car, I saw him immediately. Callen, standing at the top of the stairs, laughing with guests, arm around Isolde. He looked different, broader, sharper, but also smaller somehow. As if power had replaced depth. When his eyes found mine, he stilled. A beat, 2. Then he blinked and looked away. Coward. Verena greeted me with a kiss on the cheek. "You look radiant," she whispered. "Don't let him shrink you." I didn't plan to. The first hour passed in waves of clinking glasses, polished conversations, and the slow undercurrent of tension. I could feel the stares, the silent questions. Is that her? The ex? The one he never talks about? And then, it happened. I was standing near the terrace when Isolde approached. She was all grace and gloss, flawless skin, diamond earrings, voice like champagne. "I heard you dated Callen," she said casually. Too casually, I met her gaze. "For 7 years." A flicker. She hadn't expected that number. "He never mentioned it," she said. "Of course he didn't," I replied. "Ghosting doesn't come with footnotes." Isolde blinked, a practiced smile tightening. "Well, people change." "Do they?" I asked, tilting my head. "Or do they just put on better suits and lie more gracefully?" Her smile cracked just slightly, but she was good. She recovered fast. "I hope you're not here to cause trouble," she said, her tone dipped in sweetness. "I'm not," I said, lifting my glass. "I'm here because your future mother-in-law invited me. Ask her why." She didn't respond. She left. But Callen didn't. He approached 5 minutes later, slower than I remembered him walking, like gravity had increased just for him. "Why are you here?" he asked, his voice low, almost venomous. "Hello to you too, Callen," I said. "I'm here as a guest, your mother's guest, in fact." His jaw clenched. "You don't belong here." "Neither did I in your silence," I said calmly. "But you let me live there for over a year." He looked around, making sure no one was close enough to listen. Then he leaned in. "What do you want?" I smiled. "Nothing, just to see the man who erased me flinch when I showed up whole." He swallowed hard. "I didn't owe you anything," he said, as if saying it louder might make it true. "No," I replied. "You owed me honesty." but you gave me silence and cowardice instead." He didn't answer. He walked away, stiff and controlled. That was enough for now. But the final piece of this quiet revenge wasn't mine to deliver. It was Verina's. As the night deepened and lights danced over glass and silver, the speeches began. The usual toasts, the forced laughter. And then Verina stood up, glass in hand, commanding the room like a queen returning to her court. "I want to say something personal," she said, smiling at Callen and Isolde. She spoke of love, of the Thorne legacy, of second chances and knowing when to admit you were wrong. Then her voice shifted. "Sometimes," she said, "we think silence is kindness, that sparing someone the truth will somehow protect them. But silence," she looked directly at Callen, "can be its own kind of violence." He shifted uncomfortably. "And sometimes," she continued, "the people we discard remember who they are, and they show up, not to destroy, but to remind." A pause. "I'm proud to have invited someone tonight who reminded me of that, who reminded all of us." She raised her glass to me. To me. The room followed. For a brief moment, I felt every eye on me. Not in pity, not in scandal, but in quiet acknowledgement. Callen looked furious. Isolde looked confused. I just looked whole. Because the truth is, I didn't crash that party to ruin his life. I crashed it to reclaim mine. And nothing was more beautiful than watching a man squirm, not because he was exposed, but because someone else refused to hide. As the applause faded, I sat quietly, heart steady. I had come here expecting chaos, confrontation, or maybe even to be thrown out. But what I got was something much rarer: dignified clarity. Callen barely looked at me for the rest of the evening. He stayed glued to Isolde's side, whispering something in her ear that made her expression harden. They didn't argue, at least not publicly, but tension coiled between them like a live wire. I wasn't the storm. I was the pressure system that shifted the entire atmosphere. Later, as I moved toward the coat check, Verina intercepted me. "You handled yourself well," she said, adjusting her pearl earrings. I smiled. "You gave me the stage. I just stood on it." She leaned in, voice low. "I invited you because I wanted him to see what he left behind, but I also wanted her to know who she was marrying." "And what do you think she saw?" I asked. "A mirror," Verina said, "one that shows a future she might not want." With that, she disappeared into the crowd again, leaving me wondering what, exactly, Verina was planning. Maybe this wasn't just about justice. It was about legacy. Outside, the night was cooler. I took in a breath of air, the first one in weeks that didn't feel caught in my throat. I was almost at my car when I heard heels behind me. "Wait!" Isolde called out. I turned. She stood a few feet away, her hair now loose from its updo, her eyes less painted, more real. "Did you come here just to humiliate him?" I considered the question, then shook my head. "No. I came to stop hiding from his choices." She blinked. "You were together 7 years?" "Yes. And he never said a word about you." "That's his pattern," I said. "Erase the uncomfortable truths, then replace them with prettier lies." She exhaled sharply, as if something inside her cracked. "I found an old photo in his drawer, of you. I asked him about it once. He said it was a distant cousin." I laughed. Not bitterly, not mockingly. Just sad. "I hope," I said softly, "you ask more questions." "I already have," she said, "and I don't like the answers." There it was, the first fracture. She looked at me again. "Did you love him?" "I did," I said, "but I love myself more now." She nodded slowly. Then she did something unexpected. She extended her hand. "For what it's worth," she said. "Thank you." For what? For not letting me walk into a lie with my eyes shut. I shook her hand, and just like that, I didn't feel like a ghost anymore. I felt like a woman who had returned from the dead and brought the truth with her. A week after the engagement party, I was still reeling, not from regret, but from the gravity of what had been left unsaid. Isolde hadn't called, neither had Callen. Verena, however, sent me flowers. A handwritten card nestled between the white peonies read, "Truth can be inconvenient, but it never expires. VT." It wasn't gratitude, it was approval. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was reacting to Callen's actions. I was finally in control of my own narrative, but something gnawed at me. Why had he ghosted me so suddenly? Why not just break up? Why vanish? The answer, I knew, lay in the pieces I hadn't bothered to collect. Until now. I started by digging through our old shared files, things we'd co-managed during our years together. Travel bookings, finances, a few business ventures we once flirted with launching. His email was still listed as a backup on an old shared Dropbox. To my surprise, he hadn't removed himself. Sloppy. What I found inside wasn't scandalous, not at first, but something caught my eye. A folder dated just 1 month before he disappeared. Inside was a contract, a business agreement, and a name I didn't recognize. Varen Tech Investments, the same last name as Isolde. Was it possible Callen had begun working with her family long before he ghosted me? Had our relationship become a liability? I needed more. A friend of mine, Lucy, worked in private wealth management. She owed me a favor from way back when I helped her get out of a toxic engagement. When I told her what I needed, she didn't ask too many questions. 2 days later, she handed me a file over coffee. "This stays between us," she warned. Inside was a financial profile. Callen had received a 6-figure deposit from Varen Holdings 3 weeks before he vanished from my life. Not long after, he'd transferred it into a shell company, CT Advisory. "Looks like hush money," Lucy muttered. "Or leverage." I stared at the statement. Or both. It hit me like a punch to the chest. He hadn't just ghosted me, he'd sold me out. Suddenly, all the dots connected. The inexplicable silence, the carefully wiped digital trail, the avoidance. I wasn't just a loose end emotionally. I was a liability in a financial and professional move, one he had quietly monetized. My anger didn't flare. It calcified. This wasn't just betrayal. This was strategy. And now I had mine. The more I traced the connections, the clearer the pattern became. Varen Holdings had absorbed Callen not just romantically through Isolde, but professionally and financially. He was embedded, a perfectly curated accessory to a family legacy, the kind of son-in-law who came with no baggage because he'd erased it. I, apparently, was part of that erasure. But Callen had made a mistake. He assumed I would stay silent, that I'd accept the abandonment, the sudden disappearance, the years wasted, and move on quietly, that I wouldn't think to dig, that I wouldn't dare to challenge the narrative he and Isolde were now spinning. He'd underestimated me, again. And the more I uncovered, the more deliberate his actions appeared. I pulled out a dusty storage bin from the back of my closet, the one I had meant to throw out 100 times but never had. It held remnants of our shared past, printed photographs, old ticket stubs, forgotten birthday cards. It felt like archaeology. Buried under a worn, leather-bound journal was a receipt, one from a hotel in Montauk. The date was seared into my memory. It was the week Callen had told me he was on a business retreat alone, except this receipt listed 2 guests, 2 meals, 2 glasses of wine, and a name scribbled on the back in fading ink, Isolde. I blinked. This wasn't just a rebound. It had started before the ghosting, possibly long before. I took a photo and backed it up in 3 encrypted drives. Suddenly, every smile I had seen on Isolde's face at the engagement party curdled in my memory. Not clueless joy, but triumph. She had known, not just about me, but about what it had cost to remove me. I sat back in my chair, heart thudding. I wasn't the ex. I was the sacrifice. I opened my laptop and started compiling a timeline. Dates, transfers, hotel receipts, digital traces, names, numbers. I backed it all up. Then I opened a new folder. Its title, Closure. This wasn't going to be a messy scandal. I wasn't going to scream or throw drinks or spiral into public drama. This was going to be surgical, elegant, final, and it would start with Verena. Verena Thorne had become more than a curiosity in this investigation. She was now the keystone. If Callen had been absorbed into her family so seamlessly, I needed to understand how that had happened. And more importantly, why she hadn't asked questions about the woman he had vanished from. Me. I booked an appointment at the same art gallery Verena chaired in Midtown, under a different name, a new email, a legitimate-sounding foundation that wanted to donate to women-led arts initiatives. When I walked into the gallery's glass atrium, Verena was standing beneath a suspended steel sculpture, speaking to a group of interns. Regal in a tailored cream pantsuit, her silver hair perfectly waved, she looked like a woman who curated not just art, but reality itself. She didn't recognize me, not at first, but I saw something shift behind her eyes when we shook hands, a flicker. Maybe she saw Callen in my features. Maybe she was too sharp not to sense something off. Over the next hour, I listened, asked careful questions, laughed politely. I made no mention of Isolde, no mention of Callen, but I asked about family, legacy, values. Verena, as it turned out, despised scandals. She saw them as weakness. She believed in strength through structure, and her daughter's future was a sculpture she was still shaping. When I finally excused myself, she handed me a personalized card. "It was lovely meeting you. I hope we'll talk again." I walked out into the afternoon sun, gripping that card like it was a detonator. The next day, I sent her a letter. It was brief, elegant, surgical, no accusations, no demands. Just a question, printed in clean serif typeface on heavy cream paper. "Did you know he ghosted me after 7 years, Verena? Just curious." No signature, no return address. But I knew she'd know who it was from. I pictured her face as she read it. The way her perfectly calibrated world would hiccup. The cracks would be invisible to others, but I'd planted the seed. Callen was about to learn what it felt like to have your narrative questioned by the woman writing the next chapter. And Verena, that sculptor of futures, would start wondering, was her daughter marrying a masterpiece or a fraud? Either way, the next move was mine. The day of the engagement party arrived with a strange calm. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind so many times that now, as I zipped myself into a sleek black dress, sharp lines, nothing romantic, it felt like slipping into armor. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't the ex. I was the storm no one had checked the forecast for. The venue was a restored estate on the outskirts of the city, gold-trimmed, candlelit, dripping in curated elegance, the kind of place where reality bowed to appearances. I arrived alone. I was supposed to be invisible, but I wasn't, not tonight. Callen spotted me before I even made it past the garden terrace. He froze mid-sentence, champagne flute in hand, and for a brief, brilliant second, I saw it. The fear. Not confusion, not surprise. Fear. He recovered fast, of course. Callen always did. He moved through the crowd, smile plastered on like paint on old wood, before finally stepping close enough to whisper, "What the hell are you doing here?" I tilted my head, took a sip of wine, and said calmly, "Oh, didn't you hear? I'm on the guest list." His jaw tightened. "You're making a scene." "Not yet," I said, "but it's early." He reached for my arm. I stepped back, loudly enough for the nearby guests to glance over. "Don't touch me." People were watching now. Whispers. The social air growing thinner. And then, just as the tension hit a perfect peak, she appeared. Isolde Varon, the fiancée. She was radiant in a pale champagne gown, oblivious at first to the unfolding drama. Until she wasn't. "Callen?" she asked, her voice bright and confused. And that's when Verena Thorne appeared too. Regal, composed, eyes sharp enough to gut a man. "Is there a problem?" Verena asked, her gaze flicking between Callen and me. I smiled, stepping forward. "No problem. Just reuniting with an old friend. Isolde's eyes narrowed. Do you two know each other? Callen hesitated, and that was all it took. 7 years, I said softly but clearly. He disappeared without a word after 7 years. Gasps. A champagne glass shattered somewhere behind me. Isolde's face paled. What? He ghosted me, I continued, my voice unwavering. No phone call, no explanation. Just gone. Now you're marrying him. Congratulations. Isolde stood frozen. The room, once humming with polite laughter and string quartet melodies, had turned into a pressure cooker of stunned silence. Eyes flicked between us, Callen, me, Verena, and Isolde, as though they were watching a stage play they hadn't paid for. Verena was the first to move. She took a measured step forward, placing a hand lightly on her daughter's arm. "Isolde," she said calmly, "perhaps we should speak privately." But Isolde shook her off, her expression morphing from confusion to fury. "No, Mom, not privately. If there's something to know, I want to hear it now." I could see the cracks forming. All it needed was one more blow. "I have receipts," I said, reaching into my clutch and pulling out my phone. "Would you like to see pictures of us? Or maybe the messages?" He begged me to move in with him 6 months before he vanished. Callen lunged forward, trying to snatch the phone from my hand. I moved fast, far faster than he expected, and held it up high, tilting the screen for Isolde and everyone else within eyeshot. Photos, vacations, voice notes, the ring he once swore he was saving for me. His words, "Forever isn't long enough." The silence in the room was a living thing. "You lied to me," Isolde said, her voice trembling. "I didn't—" Callen started, but she cut him off with a glare so sharp it stopped him cold. "You lied," she repeated louder. "To me, to her, to everyone. What kind of man are you?" Callen looked around like a drowning man, searching for a lifeline, but no one moved. No one offered him a hand. And then Verena did something no one expected. She turned to me. "You knew who I was, didn't you?" she said quietly. "That I was Isolde's mother." "I did," I admitted. "But I also knew you hated Callen, that you once told Isolde he was the kind of man who could wear a tux and still reek of rot." Verena didn't flinch. Instead, she gave the faintest nod. "He lied to her. You exposed it. I don't like the method, but I respect the motive." Callen turned to her. "You're siding with her?" Verena's reply was like ice. "I'm siding with the truth." Isolde walked away then. Just walked. Right out of the ballroom. Her mother followed a moment later. Callen stood alone, humiliated in a room full of people who no longer looked at him the same way. His engagement in tatters. His lies in ruins. I didn't smile. There was no victory in his ruin, but there was justice. The crowd began to disperse slowly, conversations simmering beneath the surface like an aftershock. Waiters cleared half-eaten slices of cake, and the string quartet awkwardly packed up, their instruments muted by the tension that lingered in the air. But I didn't move. I stood there watching Callen as he finally dropped the mask he'd worn for years. He looked smaller somehow, deflated, his shoulders hunched, hands limp at his sides. He didn't speak, didn't try to defend himself. Maybe he knew there was nothing left to say. "Why?" I asked, not out of curiosity, but as a final echo. One last chance for honesty. His eyes met mine. "Because I was afraid," he said. "Afraid that we were too real, that you would see through me eventually. With Isolde, I could be whoever I wanted. It was easy." I nodded just once. "You thought I'd make you earn it, and she made you feel like a prince." He didn't deny it. A part of me wanted to scream, to throw the glass of champagne still clutched in my hand, to make him feel just a fraction of the chaos he left me in when he disappeared. But I didn't, because I wasn't here for revenge. I was here to put an end to a chapter that had long overstayed its welcome. Verena returned moments later, calm but stern. "She's gone home," she said. "She'll need time. Maybe more than you deserve." Callen flinched. I didn't mean to hurt her. "Intent," Verena snapped, "doesn't erase damage." Then she turned to me. "What do you want now?" I looked around the room, at the crumpled napkins, at the wilting flowers, at the half-lit chandeliers still trying to hold on to their elegance, despite the collapse that had unfolded beneath them. "Nothing," I said quietly. "I just wanted the truth to be louder than his lies." And with that, I walked away. I don't remember if anyone said goodbye. Maybe someone did, or maybe they were all too stunned to react. Outside, the air was cool and quiet. My heels clicked against the pavement like a metronome marking the end of something. I didn't know where I was going, not exactly, but I knew it wouldn't be backward. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I sat on my couch with a blanket wrapped around me, watching the city lights blink far in the distance. Sometimes closure doesn't come in a perfect bow. Sometimes it's not about forgiveness or vengeance. Sometimes it's just about standing in the wreckage, steady and silent, and realizing that the fire didn't consume you. The morning after the engagement party felt like standing in the ruins of a burned-down house. Everything looked eerily the same, but the silence hummed with the memory of flames. I woke up in my apartment, sunlight pooling on the hardwood floor, half expecting the chaos of the night before to have been a dream. But the ache in my chest, that deep emotional bruising, told me it had all been real. I sat on the edge of my bed, coffee untouched in my hand, staring at the wall. There were no calls from Callen, no apologies, no dramatic confessions, just the vacuum of silence that followed a bomb going off. And strangely, it wasn't despair that filled me. It was relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for him to come back. I wasn't checking my phone or scanning crowds for the familiar face I used to love. I had finally let go of the ghost that haunted me, and all that remained was the quiet promise of beginning again. News of the broken engagement spread quickly, faster than I had anticipated. I didn't bother reading all the gossip posts or half-whispered theories on social media. The people who mattered knew the truth, and that was enough. Verena had called me the next evening, voice softer this time, tinged with both gratitude and apology. "She didn't speak to me the whole ride home," she said, "but she's listening now. That's something." "She'll be okay," I replied. "She just needs to learn the difference between charm and character." There was a pause on the other end. "You're not what I expected," Verena finally said. "You either," I smiled faintly, "but maybe that's a good thing." That week, I returned to work. No dramatic transformation, no revenge glow-up, no fairy tale rebounds. Just me, a woman who had finally cleared the wreckage of a life built on illusions. I reorganized my apartment, donated the gifts Callen had left behind, cleaned out my inbox of years-old messages I had once clung to like lifelines. There was a strange liberation in it all. Not rage, not sadness, just clarity. One afternoon, I ran into an old friend at a coffee shop, someone I hadn't seen since before the breakup. She blinked in surprise, looked me over, and said, "You seem calm." "I am," I answered. "What changed?" I stopped hoping for closure from the wrong person. Maybe that was the truth of it. We spend so much time chasing explanations from those who wounded us, thinking they hold the keys to our healing. But they don't. Closure isn't something we're given. It's something we choose. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to Callen, but to myself. The version of me who had once waited by the phone at 2 a.m., the one who had stayed silent when she deserved answers, the one who loved too fully, too blindly. I wrote, "You deserved better. And now you know that." 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived at my office. No name on the return label, just a blank white square. I almost threw it out, assuming it was junk mail, but something about the handwriting stopped me. Clean. Familiar. Inside was a letter. From Callen. The paper smelled faintly of cologne, the kind he used to wear on our dates. I unfolded it with shaking hands, uncertain if I was ready or even willing to know what he had to say. It wasn't long, just 2 pages, handwritten. He said he didn't expect forgiveness, that he knew he had been a coward and selfish and cruel, that he ghosted me because he couldn't face his own guilt, that every day since he'd told himself I was better off without him, but deep down, he knew he just didn't deserve me. He wrote that he had tried to move on, to start over, but it was like living with half a heart. He ended with a line that struck me like a stone. "You deserved the truth, and I didn't have the courage to give it to you until now." I sat there, rereading it 3 times. A part of me wanted to cry, not because I missed him, but because I finally understood that he had always been too small for the love I gave him. I didn't write back. Some doors don't need to be reopened. They just need to be acknowledged, thanked for the lessons, and left behind. Later that week, I visited my parents. My mother, who had once feared I'd never recover from the heartbreak, hugged me tighter than usual. My father offered me a glass of wine and told me, "You look lighter." "I feel it," I said honestly. We sat outside that evening, the sky soft with twilight, and I told them everything. How I had gone to the engagement party, how Verena had stood by my side, how I had finally let go. My mom reached for my hand. "You know," she said, "sometimes we think the worst thing is being abandoned, but the real tragedy is abandoning yourself in the process." I squeezed her hand back. Not anymore. I started journaling again, taking long walks without needing a destination, cooking for myself like I was someone worth impressing. I joined a local writing workshop, something I had always put off. I wrote short stories, mostly fiction, but every single one was rooted in a truth I had lived. And I wasn't alone. At that workshop, I met others, men and women with fractured pasts and rebuilt hearts. We didn't trade sob stories. We wrote them, reshaped them, made art from them. One night, as the group lingered after class, someone asked me what had inspired my most recent story. I smiled. "Heartbreak," I said, "but the kind that sets you free." 6 months later, I received a wedding invitation. It wasn't Callen and Isolde's. That ship had long sunk. Rumor had it that Verena had pulled funding from the entire event, humiliated that her daughter would be so blind, and Isolde, now burdened with the financial fallout, had quietly called off the engagement. The invitation I received was from someone else entirely, Verena. She was marrying again, this time to a quiet, gentle man she'd met at a charity auction. The note inside was handwritten, just 3 sentences. "You reminded me what dignity looks like. Come celebrate with me. Bring someone who makes you laugh." I smiled. I didn't bring a date, but I brought myself. I wore a deep emerald dress and walked into that venue, smaller, cozier, filled with music and laughter, and watched Verena walk down the aisle with a joy that felt earned. Later, she pulled me aside. "I used to think reputation was everything," she said, "but you taught me that truth is more powerful, even if it's inconvenient." We toasted to new beginnings. The next morning, I stood by the window of my apartment, sunlight spilling across the floor. My phone buzzed. It was a message from a publishing editor I'd met at the workshop. They loved one of my stories, wanted to talk about a collection. I laughed, soft, stunned, because it was happening, not in the way I once imagined, not as someone's wife or fiancée or girlfriend, but as me. Just me. A woman who had been ghosted after 7 years, who crashed an engagement party, who stood beside the mother of the bride and watched a lie unravel, and who, in the end, didn't just get closure. She got a new beginning. I walked to my kitchen, poured myself coffee, and opened my journal. There was one last thing I needed to write. To anyone who's ever been left without answers, to the ones who waited by the phone and felt stupid for hoping, to the hearts that beat through silence,